All right, we're all good. Again, my name is Mason. I'm going to be doing your interview today. If you don't mind introducing yourself, I'm with Peter Caliendo. Is that how you say it?
Absolutely, you
He's
said
an
it
inter
right.
he,
Italian word. You
yeah,
did
right, right.
good.
He's an international sports coach and has been in the industry for a number of years, but I'll let you take it away.
Mason, thanks, man. This is a pleasure. Love doing these things, and I think they're a lot of fun. My name's Pete Caliendo, as Mason mentioned, and I've been in the game 45 years. Just so you know, I started at Mickey on Baseball School as a student, and then it evolved from there. I've been a national team coach for USA Baseball. I've been a independent coach, a director of player development, and independent baseball, where we pick the teams and pick the players, sign the contracts, and do all that. I'm president of Caliendo Sports International. We take teams around the world for competition, cultural experiences. I'm also VP of ISG Baseball, which is a nonprofit organization. We do seminars around the world. So those are some of the things that I've done. Obviously in the 40 years, I've done a lot, and I've had some really special things that I thought in my lifetime I would never have done. And we can talk about those during our talk.
Well, thank you very much, and I really do appreciate your time. I was talking to you a little bit earlier about how I kind of just randomly came upon your work, but very impressed. And if I can in 45 years talk about my experiences like you, I'll be pretty proud. So
Yeah, thank you.
we could just start at the top, though. I've got, like I said, I got a
Sure.
list of questions here. So the first one for you is, what motivated you to become a coach, and how did you end up working with your current team or organization?
Yeah, I tell you what, it all started when I was younger, like any kids, right? They want to play baseball. My parents didn't know anything about baseball, and they're Italian, came over and they've supported us in any way we can, or any way they could. And I was looking at Baseball Digest, and of course I started playing when I was 9, and then about the age of 13, 14, I started looking at Baseball Digest. I'm not even sure if you're familiar with Baseball
I'm not,
Digest, a
no.
little magazine, and that in those days had all this baseball stuff in there for Major League Baseball things, it's just very interesting. But Mickey Owen Baseball School was advertising at the time, come to the baseball school. I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool. I'm just a average player. I want to get better. So I asked my parents, my parents blue collar workers. They saw that I really had some love for baseball, which a lot of kids did also. And they said, okay, we'll go. Well, they take me to Mickey Owen Baseball School. Just to give you an idea, I get there and I'm a city kid, Chicago kid, and grew up in the suburbs, but I'm still kind of a city kid. And all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of nowhere in Springfield, Missouri. It's about 45 minutes from St. Louis. Cabins, no air conditioning, all the different bugs that I've never seen in Chicago.
Yeah.
I told my parents, I said, I don't know, it's raining. I didn't see many people there because it was in between sessions, when kids come to the school they came from all over the US and the world. And I said, I don't want to stay. Well, you got to know my parents. Hey, we paid. You like it, you're staying, right? There was no, it wasn't a democracy, right? I mean, it was a dictatorship, which they were right, right? So I stayed. They hung out for a couple days, waiting to, see how things are going. And next thing you know, 10 years later, I'm coaching. And for everybody out there, real quick, I'll make this. Uh, Dick Birmingham, a high school coach who was working there at the time, pretty much took me under his wing. I mean, my mentor, almost like a second father. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing anything I've done all over the world right now in the game of baseball. So just to give you an example how important that is, that somebody, takes you underneath their wings and kind of helps you. So that passion grew. I started to realize at 17, I was a counselor at the baseball school, and at 17, I realized I'm a good player, but I'm not, I'm average, average speed, average arm. I worked really hard, like anything, like anybody else. And I was getting better, but I wasn't at any high level. So I decided at the baseball school, well, I can play and I can coach. They asked me to coach some of the younger kids. That's where the coaching started at 17 years old. Then I became director of instruction for the 12 and under group. And like I said, I spent 10 years and that's where it all snowballed from there. From there, it just took off like a rocket. And I've been very fortunate since then.
That's awesome. I had actually a fairly similar experience in my younger life. I have a football player though. I've played football since I was 8, but I actually didn't make my middle school football team, and that kind of kind of put a hitch in things. And it took
Yes.
me for my parents to put me in positions where I had no option. My parents always said if I started something, I would have to finish it with no ifs, ands, or buts. And I ended up actually playing 5 years of college football and was an all conference. And so I
Wow.
went
Yeah.
from
See that? And where at? Florida State?
no, I was actually at Baldwin Wallace, Division III in Ohio. But yeah, I was a 3 year team
And, and
captain and starter.
And similar to you, I ended up playing college baseball. I really shouldn't have been playing college baseball. I went to UIC, which is in the city of Chicago. It's a sister school, University of Illinois. Now, was I able to do that? Because of the Mickey Owen Baseball School, playing 100 games in the summer, umpiring 100 games, having my own field that I had to work on, the whole field by myself. All the counselors had to do that. So we learned everything about the craft, but fundamentally, I was pretty good. And so that made up for some of it. So what happened? Somebody got hurt, I played right field. Somebody got hurt, I played short. Somebody got hurt, I played second because I could do all the fundamentals really well. And then so that helped me become a much, better player because of the coaching aspect.
Right. And not to make this any more about myself, obviously this is about your
No,
experiences,
no,
but
that's
I was actually an offensive guard in high school, if that tells you anything about
yeah,
the sacrifice that I was willing to do as well.
big time.
I was a linebacker and a guard at 160 pounds. So if that tells you anything,
Wow.
I blew up thankfully. But moving on here, you know, I, we haven't talked a whole lot about what your position is currently. I know you do own the business and everything. But how does coaching where you're at currently, whether that's domestically or internationally, and if you want to talk about some previous experiences, that's okay too. But
Mhm.
how does that compare to other places that you've coached or observed? So that international experience versus that domestic experience.
Sure. Domestically, I was lucky because I actually started a pilot program for USA Baseball at the time, and it was for a different organization that was working with USA Baseball. Started the national teams, official national teams that played in the Pan Am Games at 16. Because of my mentor, who it was one of the managers, I also was one of his coaches. So not only did I put the program together and found the players nationally, and then coached with him internationally. So I've got that mixture of both national, internationally, and then coaching independent ball. That was another aspect of my development because it helped me. I was dealing with single A players, double A players, triple A players. So that's a lot of the coaching that I was doing. But you know what? The game of baseball is the game of baseball. Whether you go to Australia, whether you go to Japan, whether you go to Cuba, whether you go to uh, Italy, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. The people are the people. I mean, the players are the same. You're able to coach anywhere in the world as long as you understand certain things. Now, do you have to know the culture a little bit? Yes, because I became the Belgium national team coach at one time. And to give an idea, a lot of people might say, well, Belgium baseball, yeah, it's a small country, only 2,000 players. But I became the national team coach for all their national teams, and then I picked coaches for each team, and I did the senior team. But to give you an example, you have to know the culture of that country too, because in Belgium they like to drink a lot of beer, right? So after games, and their clubs, so you have a club at a field with a clubhouse, and all the teams from that club are there. After a game, they go in the clubhouse. The umpire might be there, the players are there, and they're drinking, right? So, well, I couldn't go in there as an American coach and say, there's no drinking, at the ballpark because that's their culture. We may not allow it in the US. So I had to think of something else to do. So what I did was, okay, look, I understand it's a culture. I understand we got to do that. Just be real careful because you got the umpires there. Sometimes you might have opposing teams there too, some players. But I had one stipulation. I asked them. I said, no uniforms, nothing with the uniform on, no uniform hat. Plain clothes. That way, go in, relax, and then we kind of decided that was okay. And so that's kind of a give and take that you do internationally. Other than that, I mean, the game's the game, and it's a lot of fun. And I've been lucky because, give you an example, I was in Cuba nine times, and I traveled with the Cuban Baseball Federation. All over Cuba helping coaches. Now, at the same time, not only was I helping coaches, but they were helping me because I learned a lot from their way, how they played, how they developed, how they trained. And because of 55 countries that I've been to, I've been able to see all the different countries that are innovative. They have different ideas. They have different ways of doing things. That's why I have my podcast, Baseball Outside the Box, because I think thinking different is important when you're trying to develop athletes. You don't want to be stuck in the same way all the time. You want to stick to the fundamentals, but you don't want to stick to the same thing all the time. So there's better ways, there's new ways, there's better ideas, and that really helps. Now with the Cubans, it was unique because I was actually, and that is how lucky you get because I don't have a name. I was the first American ever, American coach ever, before the Cuban Revolution or after the revolution, to be asked by the Baseball Federation to travel Cuba. Why? Because of my time with the Cuban Federation. It took a while, it took probably 15, 20 years to gain their trust. And once they saw that, they asked me to participate in that and kind of venture like that. And that's just a great honor because if you know Cuban baseball, it's one of the best in the world also. US, Cuba, Japan. I mean, there's some great baseball countries.
Yeah, that's incredible. I could not imagine. Especially in that time frame, that's just incredible that you were able to have those experiences and obviously still be able to hold those experiences and talk about them. It's just that's incredible. Um, You've kind of alluded to talking about like the drinking rule and not having uniforms. I definitely see that like respect kind of style in your coaching.
Mhm.
So if you want to talk a little bit about your coaching style and philosophy, and maybe how that evolved, whether you started out a different way and now you feel a certain way, how has that evolved, or what is your stance or philosophy on that?
Good point. I mean, basically, when I started Mickey on baseball school, the old school was, fundamentals, 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 right? And then it was once you said it, that's what the players would do, right? Now, those times have changed a little bit because, people change a little bit and customs and how players are brought up. And there's better ways to communicate with players. And what you're seeing now, which again, I go back to my podcast because of the podcast, Baseball Outside the Box, it brings up new ideas, new training methods, and you have to be open-minded. I mean, I'm 63 and I'm still trying to figure things out. So I'm extremely open-minded to new things. And so the difference now in the training aspect, or even in the coaching aspect, whether it be games or anything else, is asking more questions to the players so they can figure out on their own what's best for them. Because you can give them a drill, and then instead of saying, "Hey, keep doing this drill," you might want to say, "How does this feel?" You feel like you're getting better. Does it feel better? With your motion. The more questions you ask, the more responses you get from the player. The player's learning, and the other thing is, um, this is baseball now. I don't know about other sports. I'm a big believer, and this has been a big change for me, even with our young kids. And remember, I've done a lot more internationally, but even with our young kids in the States, I want them to play the game. What's happening nowadays in the game of baseball is we want to control everything. We want to micromanage everything, right? Tell them when to steal, when to do this, when to do that. I don't know about you, but I remember when I was 9 years old, I always go back to that. I went out and played, and I'm a lot older than you are, but we went out and played in the middle of nowhere, wherever we could, and we didn't need coaches. We just played and we learned by ourselves. Later became a little organized. So I want players I actually encourage them at a very young age, at 10 years old, make decisions. In other words, if the ball's hit in front of you and you can see it, make a choice if you're going to go to the next base. You don't need a coach waving you around. Now, coaches will say, well, but if we do that, they're going to get thrown out. Well, that's okay. Michael Jordan said, hey, I made 3,000, 4,000 mistakes before I became any good. Well, that's how you learn is by making a mistake. And now you can figure out. Now, there's a great example. You can then ask the player, okay, you got thrown out at third. You don't want to show emotion as a coach because that doesn't help at all because they're going to look at you right away. You want to be calm. You just want to ask a question. What did you think about, how did you make that decision? You know, and then get their feedback. Because now, as you get their feedback, you're learning how they were thinking, how they were looking at the ball or the guys throwing it or why they made that choice. So that's, I think, something that's changed in the coaching a lot. And I like it a lot more because I'll give you a quick example. I was in Tenerife, Spain, 18U European players, some of the better ones. and we had four teams. It was an instructional camp and a tournament at the same time. So I managed the team for 3 years there. We didn't know these players. You got a couple practices, and then you're starting to play games, right? Competitively, which you want to try to win the best you can. The players want to win. They have a lot of fun. Well, I had to involve the players in a lot of things, right? Like sitting down and talking to them about, okay, you're from this country. Where'd you bat in the order? Why did you bat in the order at that time? What's your strength? What's your weakness? And then I put the batting order together. But then I had them put the batting order together because they were all in the meeting also and listened to everybody. And then I looked at all the different batting orders that they had. So that's the kind of interaction I had with the players, and that's what I like doing because players are going to come up to you and ask you a question. They're going to say, they just struck out. They're going to say, "What do you think I did wrong?" First thing I'd say is, "What do you think happened? Where was the pitch?" Ask them where the pitch was, and maybe it was up here and they didn't realize it was that high. So the more questions you ask, the more input you get from the players, the better the situation is.
I have a lot of respect for that. That was definitely, as a player, for me, what I responded to most. I am a critical thinker. I always have been. I was a 3-year captain. I played linebacker in college. And anytime anything went wrong, I was on the headset always. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have that same coach sometimes to be like, hey, what did you do wrong? It was always, this is what happened. This is how we fix it.
Right.
But I know growing up, I had a big, especially from my high school coach. I was very independent. I didn't get recruited very heavily either. And so when I was on the field, it was always my head coach was my linebacker coach. And so if
Mm,
something went wrong as a 17-year-old, he didn't feel like he had to come up to me and yell at me. He felt like I would get more benefit out of him saying, hey, you missed that tackle. Or I vividly remember, I don't know how much you know about football, but we had a team in Pensacola that was running a triple option,
mm.
a wing T triple option, like 60s, 70s football. And as a linebacker, I had no idea what I was doing. I went a whole half and like
Wow.
was just scrambling. And at halftime, he asked me what I thought about it, how I could improve, things like that. I gave him some feedback. And the next half, we completely shut him out.
Wow.
I've always seen progress, and I always respect coaches that are like that. Because not only does it take out my stress factor, because I've already got enough stressors, it actually lets
Hmm.
me learn and, I can grow.
And Mason, I have to tell you, a lot of it for me has to do because of the baseball school. I'll keep referring to it because I had, being younger, I had older coaches there. So I had a lot of different coaches from different states, but my mentor was the best. I mean, he was a Greg Landry. I don't know if you know Greg Landry. Yeah, he was the Greg Landry of baseball. I mean, that articulate, sharp, positive, Southern draw, knew how to communicate. He can manage anywhere, anything, anytime. He can get a player to run through a wall 100% every time. And you know what? I've never heard him yell. Not, but I've never heard Coach Birmingham yell. I mean, and he didn't have to yell. So I think because of that, I was able to learn so much just through osmosis, just by being with him, because I traveled with him. I was under his tutelage all the time. And then you kind of develop your own coaching style, but a lot of it came from Coach Birmingham.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Pivoting a little bit now, I keep hearing that line you said, how you said that it took like 10 years for the Cuban national team to finally trust you. That word of trust kind of
Hmm.
resonated with me. So thinking about that word of trust, what are some ways, or how do you build trust and connections with players from different cultural backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds, different ways of thinking? Like, what are some ways that you build that trust that obviously you had to build from them as well?
And you know what? In the toughest areas are the places like Cuba, like Russia, where I've been to Russia several times, working with coaches. Uh, because they come from a different mentality, right? They come from that. Um, this is how we do it. We challenge everything. And I think the way I dealt with it was no different. I think honesty is number one, being straightforward, because I think they'll appreciate that. Listening, I think if I had, look, I think you have to understand your own skills, right? I can't write. My vocabulary is not the best. Even though I speak three languages, they're probably all mixed up, right? But I know my weaknesses. I've got others, but I also know my strength. And one of my strengths, I say my strongest one is listening. And I think the listening skills is what's important. So if you mix the asking of the questions along with your listening skills, and when I say listening, um, there was a gentleman, a coach, Gordy Gillespie, who was on my staff. He's the all-time, at that time, was the all-time winningest college baseball coach, Division three, but he was all-time winning of all levels, Division one, two, and three. Even it was coach four sports, football, basketball, baseball, or three sports, was in every Hall of Fame, right? And when he spoke at the national convention with 5,000 coaches, you could hear a pin drop. He was your famous football player, a coach that's been around for 40 years that everybody respects. When he talked to you, this sounds very simplistic, but simplistic is important. When he talked to you, he looked at you in the eye. He was talking to you. He wasn't talking to you and looking around where other coaches were at. I think those are the things I think that people appreciate that you're giving them the time, no matter what level they're at, no matter what player they are. They could be the worst player in the team, the best player in the team. You're still treating them the same. You're giving them the exact, time that they need. And I think if you do that with the Cubans, I was honest with them. Matter of fact, one of the Cuban Baseball Federation presidents spoke Italian. I never found out till 5 years later. Why? Because he probably was trying to figure out, hey, if I'm talking to somebody in Italian, he knows what I'm saying. He's going to see how honest I really am, right? Because I might be talking about him. I think honesty is really goes a long way with players, and really paying attention to this is the next thing because people talk about, oh, you're a baseball coach, you must do fundamentals a lot. No, no. In games, it's all about paying attention to your players, right? Watching how they react, watching their emotions. Looking down at the end of the bench, and you see a player a little down and hit max, maybe, and give them a thumbs up. Don't say anything, just know that you're looking at them, right? You're worried about them, all those little things, talking to a player, putting your hands on their shoulders and looking them in the eye. They appreciate that, right? Because you're giving them the attention. So I think that's how I've dealt with everybody, whether it be coaches, whether it be players around the world. Did I have to learn the customs? Absolutely. I've been to Japan 20 times. Japanese got different customs. You got to be real careful, right? I have a habit, and I've tried to cut it down. I spit sometimes, right? We can't do that in Japan. You don't spit on the ground, right? A business card, how you handle business cards. The Japanese, you can't interject humor right away, right? You've got to get to know them before you can start interjecting some humor. Where in some other areas you can interject humor right away, because humor goes a long ways with opening up the lines of communication, and that people feel comfortable. If you're at the same level they are, instead of being here and being there. And I'm not saying you're still going to discipline players when they need to be disciplined, okay? But I see too many coaches at young levels. They want to be here and the players here. On a small example, and I'll end with this. I see a lot of coaches talking to players. They're on one knee and the coach is standing up. Well, to me, you're looking down. I think you need to be the same level with young kids. Some coaches will wear sunglasses. I tell my players, hey, we're communicating, take your sunglasses off. That's a sign of respect for me, is not only from the coach, but the player when they take the sunglasses off, because I want to see your eyes. I want to see how you react. So those are the things, and obviously getting to know your players is extremely important. So um, last example, I'll send out a questionnaire to a lot of the coaches and players at times, asking them questions if I can't, before I go there, because that way I get to know a little bit about them before I even attend that country. And that helps me with the communication aspect and then understanding the culture a little bit.
That's awesome.
A lot of stuff.
No, 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 that's awesome. This is all like for me, I don't have any experiences with international anything. Football is obviously up until probably the last 5 years has been a very domestic sport. There's been no outreach. There's been no, you very, very seldomly hear about an international football player outside of the last probably 5 years. And then the NFL decided to build those
Oh yeah,
programs
big
and build
time.
those outreach programs. And even now, with myself being involved in recruiting, we have the NFL Academy that's based in Britain.
Right.
And I honestly, they're actually located internationally, but there's a focus in Britain.
Sure.
We have
Baseball's the
numerous.
same way. They have their MLB offices there.
Exactly. We have recruits come in from the NFL Academy. We actually have one kid that attended a camp for us a couple weeks ago. Luke Francis is an offensive lineman that
Hmm.
is from the UK and is attending Coral Gables. We brought him on a visit. He is moving in 3 months, and he committed to us. So
Wow.
it's that international experience that I'm just now getting, and so hearing these examples is it's great for me.
Yeah, and I failed to mention them. I mentioned the Japanese, even in their culture, like, they take their hats off when they talk to you, right? And you have to understand what the Japanese culture is, and that this is the difference. They're still at when you tell them something, they do it. They're still at you're the master, we're the student. The coaches are the same way. Very rarely are they going to ask you questions. It's opening up a little bit, but most of the time they're looking for information. Now, go to Russia and the coaches will challenge you, which is fine, right? I mean, we got major league guys that come with us to Russia, coaches, and hey, you got the Russian coaches who've been doing it for 30, 40 years. They got pretty good history of developing players, through and athletes through the Olympics and all that, and they'll challenge you. So you have to be ready for that too. So there are different ways to deal with the cultures around the world.
Yeah, I bet you just reading, I do a lot of reading in in this class, especially, and just seeing the kind of challenges that coaches face internationally. One thing that we haven't really discussed is like pressures as a coach internationally, and specifically from the media or the public. I know that, especially from what I've been reading and seeing, that
Mhm.
sometimes the public in other countries and even the media really is bashful, and sometimes can be very unsupportive, whether it's because of your background or just being different. So I don't know if you have, but if you have had instances like that, what were they like, and how did that affect you as a coach?
Yeah, that's another good one. I'll tell you why, because in each country, I learned early on, when my first time in Belgium running the national teams, you're going into their territory. You're going into their area. All of a sudden, the federation puts you as the head coach, even though they knew me, it's like, well, but now all of a sudden, he's going to pick the coaches and this is our country. Not that they said that, but sometimes you can feel it, right? So you have to be real careful who you're making friends with. If you're too much in one area, let's say because in baseball and especially in Europe, there are different clubs. So let's say you're with one club and you're hanging out there a little bit too long. Now they're going to think, you're favoring those players. So you got to be real careful with how you deal individually, and also how forceful you are. I mean, you got to go in with open eyes, open mind. You got to ask them a lot of questions and immediately have them give the input, on how things are going, what changes they need. Don't go in there telling them what they need, because again, different culture, different systems sometimes, right? Maybe they only play 30 games a year, where we're used to playing 65 or 80 games. It depends. So you really have to understand all that before you go into that situation. And then you've got to find who you can really trust, on your coaching staffs. But that's no different than the US, right? That's why people hire people they know and they've worked with because they trust them. Going internationally, you may not know all the coaches, and now you got to figure that out too, and who you're going to hire. And the other part is, and on a national level, you're picking a national team. That's the other part. Sometimes you have to make some tough decisions people aren't going to like. Releasing players, bringing players up, but that's part of the system. And I think the way you do that is, again, by including the coaches on the staff or in that country in with the input. Get all the input you can, and then you make the decision. So those are some of the things that I had to deal with, um, because again, you're going into their territory. I mean, that's normal. Now, when you're doing coaching seminars, that's a whole different ballgame because that's information, that's networking, that's having fun. That's the easy part because you're giving information. Now, you're going to get challenged, like I told you in Russia, and you want that challenge. But when you're going in and you're going to be a head coach of a team, so sometimes you're almost better off being like a consultant to the manager. and giving him advice on the bench than you are being the head person. It all depends on the situation.
Have you had any specific pressures from like public opinion or the media in any of your experiences?
Baseball internationally is not as big, so you're not going to get the media aspect as much. Um, but I've been challenged, by uh, clubs and federations, which then they in turn talk to their local media about it. Yeah, so they bring that stuff up because it's their way to, put you in the spotlight a little bit. But not, no, and baseball has been pretty good. Where I can see if you're at a high profile, if you're an American manager and you're hired in England at one of the soccer teams, one of the top soccer teams, you're going to be up for a lot of pressure, obviously. But in our situation, I mean, I think if anything, there's pressure with the media is when you're a national team coach and you're going into international competition, whether it's 18U World Championships or the Olympics. There you're going to get a little bit more scrutiny from the media um, on decisions you made, or maybe your own media on players you cut, but things like that. But in our situation, yeah, very rarely do we see that.
That's probably relieving in some ways because
Absolutely, you can
some
get
of
your
the things
job
that I've
done.
read are pretty nasty with how the media can affect and influence not only a coach while he's there or she's there, but also their longevity because it can spoil their taste to work internationally sometimes. So that's probably nice.
Well, and not just internationally, because I've had friends that, and I won't mention names, I'm managing the big leagues. And I didn't even believe it till they told me. They've had calls from ownership telling them so and so's got to play third base because he's got him in a fantasy camp at third base. I mean, can you imagine that? Now even Major League Baseball now managers, they've got to work with their front office a lot because they're doing all the statistics, so they got to communicate. But I can see, if you're a young manager and they're telling you what to do, you got no choice. But if you're a manager who's been there 10 years, you want to take the input, you want to use all that, you want to work together. But at the same time, you need to make that decision. That's why you hire me, because there's some gut feeling in there too, even though I'm looking at all the different stats, and I think the stats are important, but I think you need to use your gut a little bit also, and that's pressure. Is when you're getting that kind of pressure, that's tough.
That's awesome. Well, just two more questions for you. We're going
Sure.
to pivot just a little bit. Obviously, we've been talking about players and coaches in the game, but I want to kind of talk about how you, as a coach, or even as a director, um, kind of mold and form and develop players outside of the game. Like, what are some ways that what are some tactics or what are some things that you do to try to develop them outside of sports performance?
What outside of their skill level in the
Just
sport?
outside of sports in general. So whether it's molding them
Ah,
as young athletes or I'm sorry, as young people or even as
yeah.
adults, like what are some things that you might do?
I'll tell you what, one of the things I've done that I really like doing a lot, with today's, technology, it's not rocket science. Um, I like to I like to have players on WhatsApp. Internationally, I know if it's US, we could text. Now, why do I like that individually and as a group? Because I may not see them for a while, but I want to continue to communicate with them. I think that's a failure of a lot of people in life in general. We make friends, different places. We meet players that we like or don't like, doesn't matter, but we don't stay in touch very often, right? I stay in touch with as many people as I can. Now, sometimes you can't stay in touch with everybody. So to help develop especially the younger players, the European, let's take the European or the Asian or whatever, anywhere in the world, I'll be on WhatsApp and I'll send them certain videos of something that happened in a game. Boom, and mention, what do you think about this? Could he have done it differently? Or a fundamental drill that they can work on to help them because I knew what they were going through, or things on nutrition because I think we miss a lot of things like nutrition, how to recover faster. And you know this from being a strength and conditioning coach. The mental part of the game, all that stuff. I'm always trying to get them information, and sometimes they're not real good at communicating back and forth. And that's what I'm trying to teach them is communicate, stay in touch with people because one, I think there was an old saying, if I remember, and I can't remember exactly how it went, but I get the concept. As you're going up, people are coming down, and you want to get to know all these people, or vice versa. You're going down, they're coming up. Well, if they know you and they respect you, they can lift you back up into another position and into a game or can help you in life. But if you don't communicate with anybody, you never stay in touch, after a while, people are going to forget you. But with players, especially, I think it's important to continue their development long term. Because what's the goal in baseball? Toughest sport to keep players in the game. Okay. Why? There's the highest failure in baseball than there is in any other sport. You know that. Um, so because of that failure, players quit earlier. Well, that's why we need that continual education, right? And sometimes that motivation. Hey, John or Mason, how you doing? What's going on? How you're at the University of so and so. How did it go this year? I want players to send me information on what they're doing in their season because maybe they went on to college or maybe they're professional players. And the more you stay in touch with them, the more it's all about caring about people. And I mean, it's honesty that you're doing that with. You're not doing it for your own benefit. You're doing it to help them. And I think in the long term, that again, another area that's going to help develop players is by continually staying in touch. So that's what I use. I use WhatsApp a lot. That can be done nowadays in other ways, I'm sure, technology wise. Because remember, they're not gathering all the information all the time. I might have something new from Japan. I might have something new from Korea, Cuba, wherever it may be, and I want to share that with them. Or I might want to send them a message just one on one, just to say hi and how things are going. I'm still in touch with guys in Europe as of today, 3 years later.
That's very insightful. I actually use WhatsApp. I'm in a group project with another girl, and she's actually in the military overseas. And so her and I have to use WhatsApp to communicate, and I could see why that's such a good tool. Because I feel like also in my personal opinion, being disconnected from text message and being on an app is more intentional because you
Mhm.
get texts from, 100 people a day, but that WhatsApp
Right.
may only link up 5, 6 times a day. And so you can be more intentional with that focus on there,
Absolutely. And you
which is
can do
great.
video
Right.
conference. You can call them video. You don't even have to call, instead of text. The other thing, you got voice right
Right.
on there. You can do voice and you can send videos all over the world where text sometimes only allows so much and it's slow. Yeah, I love it. I use it a lot to communicate. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because of the technology, you'd like to be more personal. You'd like to be able to call them on the phone, right, and talk. But you can't do that with, 300 people. You're never going to get any work done, right? So WhatsApp helps because it's that quick message, right? Just thinking about them, that's all, right? And then again, where did I get that from? From big league managers that I met at conventions who didn't know who I was, that met me once, but yet remembered my name, right? Boy, did that feel good. So can you imagine if you're, somebody that's a little higher level is constantly reaching out to you? So when you reached out to me was a great example. I didn't say, well, I don't know how much time I have. I'm not this and that. No, to me, I don't know Mason. And then you're a young guy. You're probably 22, 23, 24.
24. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know you. You're 24 years old. Why would I give you any time? Well, why? Because people gave me that time, and I learned that. And I think a lot of it came from my parents too. My parents taught me a lot of great life skills, being Italian, um, and I think that helped me in understanding how to deal with people. Because if I can help an individual in the future, hey, great. That people help me. Why not help others?
Well, obviously, I expressed it before, but I'll express it again. I'm very grateful. I had an idea. I do have one more question for you, but I had an idea of how this would go, and I don't think I ever could have thought how well it would have gone and the information that I would have gained from it. So I really do
I
appreciate
appreciate
you
that.
for taking that time because
Oh, my pleasure.
not only this assignment aside, the life skills that you've taught me in this interview have been incredible. So I really do not only appreciate your time, but the information that you've given me. Last question for you, and then we can get into anything final you want to talk about.
Sure.
What's the most important piece of advice that you would give a coach looking to work internationally, whether that's a veteran coach or somebody like me who's never really seen a coaching atmosphere. What would what piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, before you go do it, and I did kind of mention it in some of the talks. Definitely before you happen to go overseas and take that job, do your homework, do your research, understand the culture, understand what you're getting into. Because example, I remember in the old days, I went to Italy, and I spoke the language, but I knew a lot of Americans that went to Italy. And in those days, they'd go to a club and they'd have practice and they get all organized, right? I mean, you'd have your organized, how just like football coaches, everything's detailed, every to the minute, to the second, attention to detail, this, that. And then five guys showed up for practice, right? Out of 12 or 15. Why? Because they were studying, they were doing other things. It's the culture. They're not going to always be at practice. You got to learn to adjust. If you're going to stick, if you don't know that and you go in with the mentality, now you start getting mad at players because they're not showing up, that's going to put you in a bad situation. And understanding that they only have one third baseman, maybe that country. Well, now you get that third baseman upset, he quits. Now what do? You don't have a third baseman. You got to figure out something else. So you're going to lose players. So understanding what you're getting into, so once you get there, you already know their culture and how they do things, and then figure it out how to make that adjustment to compromise on certain things. So really know what you're getting into. I think that's the most important advice I can really give a coach that's going to go international. Don't go in there, um, thinking, oh, I'm American and I'm the best coach and we know more than everybody else. Be a little humble and again, we'll go back to the ask them a lot of questions, get them involved in decision making. It's not rocket science. And then lastly, I'll say every time I bring all this stuff up, that the answers to your questions, it really goes back to my mom and dad, how they taught me and how I was brought up. Because I always say, you know, managing coaches, it's not that hard. Even though people find it hard, I don't find it as hard. And I think because the way I was brought up, I'm using those same skills that my parents used and taught me to deal with people. And that's what managing is all about. Whether you're managing sports or managing a company or whatever you're managing, it's about caring about people, reading people, listening, and getting them involved in whatever you're doing, getting their input.
That's great. Again, I really appreciate everything we've talked about. You've given me some really, really crucial information. Do you have anything final to maybe talk about, or anything that you'd like to say before we finish up?
No, first of all, just thank you. I appreciate it, Mason. This has been great. It helps me too because it's fun to kind of, go back and think about how you do things. A lot of times you're busy and every day and you don't really realize. Now, advice to coaches, one more thing maybe. Um, I've done this a lot. If you want to get better, sure, we can look at videos. Yes, we can look, talk to different skills coaches or mental training coaches or nutritionists and all that. Of course, you want to get knowledge. But when you run a practice or when you have a game, find your mentor and ask them to come out to watch you and what you're doing. It's similar to kind of videotaping yourself or tape recording yourself so you understand what kind of volume you're using in voice, what kind of expressions, what kind of looks you're giving players. But have your mentor come out because they can evaluate a lot of things that you're doing. And now it's a little tough to the ego, but it's really going to help you in, understanding how do I get better. It's really hard for yourself to figure it out. But if you have somebody else who you really respect, watch how you do things. He may not be on your coaching staff or she may not be on a coaching staff, but they can really give you some honest opinion. Pete, you need to do this. Mason, you need to change this because if you continue to do this, you're going to lose some of your players. I mean that and take that input in. I think that's my final thing really to coaches if they're going to get better. That's two things I do is I ask mentors to come to me and sometimes I'll videotape some of the things I'm doing.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate your time and thank you for all the information. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then we can.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Awesome.
Mason.
Awesome.